Guys, welcome to the Cook and the Coach podcast.
I'm Kenny, I'm the cook.
Baeza, I'm the coach. Guys, we are excited to have you today.
Yes, so we have a really exciting interview. We're so glad to do it. We sat down with our friend Francesca. She's a dancer and a student in Florida in their dance program at University of South Florida. And yeah, I think you guys are going to love the conversation.
Here it is, guys. Check it out.
Thanks so much for being on, Francesca. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk with you. One of the things we love to do on the show, we love just bringing like various creative people on the show, like learning about like their creative process. And it's also kind of just like a shit talking opportunity for us just in general too. So like one thing, and we were talking about this briefly. It's wild. Like I think we've only had, like you and I have only had a couple conversations like ever, but we've known each other for like over a decade. And I was talking with Baez about this, like, Baez, like, do you ever like know people on social media and like feel like you know them super well, but then you're like, holy shit, like, I don't know if we've ever like really talked. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, that's like me and Francesca. That's wild.
It's literally, it's so funny too, because I feel like because social media is such a controlled environment, like we can control what we share, that we basically control what people know about us. So like you could know a person based on their social media, but you might not, you know?
That's fair. Well, Francesca, for the people like watching on YouTube or just listening, maybe like tell us just like a little bit about yourself. Like, I know you're going to like University of South Florida. You're in the dance program, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. And were you doing exercise science for a little bit too? Like, are you still doing that or did you like switch?
Wow. I'm shocked that you remember that. That feels like ages ago.
Memory of an elephant.
Yeah. Wow. Maybe you do know me, but, but so I am currently a junior in the dance program at the University of South Florida. I'm going to be getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts at the end of spring 2022. And I have been dancing my entire life. So since I'm like 5 years old, and that's been like my whole world. I just never have ventured off. That's like my only passion that I'm trained in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what are some things that people would need to know about me? I'm 24. I'm going to be 25 this year. I also sing. I do that for fun.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm living in Tampa, Florida right now, just trying to get that degree.
Nice. Hell yeah. So Baez and I, we both love that, this comedian, Andrew Schultz, and he's been talking he's in Florida right now. He moved just with COVID. And I've been hearing like wild shit about like how Florida's handling COVID. Like, what is it like down there? Like, cause you're like not only living down there, but you're also like, I guess on campus, right? Or at least like taking classes like in a university. Like, what's that like?
So Florida in general with COVID, there's like this joke of Florida being like the most relaxed state in terms of like dealing with COVID.
Sure.
It feels like a different world. Like I haven't really traveled anywhere outside the state during this whole time, but I just know that, you know, if you're outside and you're not close to people aren't wearing a mask. And I've even been in situations inside where people are just like, nah, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm good. So, and then in university setting, it's interesting because, you know, people that are living on campus, you barely see anybody, but when you do, like, there's a difference between like college people and then the rest of the people. Like, I feel like because more people in college are, I don't want to say educated because that doesn't mean people outside of college aren't educated, but because we're in academia, people are a little bit more cautious. So like you'll see people walking around campus with a mask more often than you will like at a restaurant or a bar or wherever. So yeah.
Sure.
That's interesting. I feel like it'd be the opposite way around though, because I feel like the young people in school would want to be like carefree and be like, fuck it, whatever, let's go. And the people who are maybe not in that world would be like more cautious, more protective of themselves. But it's actually the other way around, I guess. I don't know. That's interesting to me.
It kind of is. I mean, from the experience that I've had on campus, I mean, there are, of course, guidelines that you have to follow. Like you won't be allowed in an on-campus building without a mask, depending on there, of course, you know, it just depends on the day. But yeah, that's been my experience so far.
Sure. That's so different. Like Minnesota, I feel like is probably maybe like handling COVID a little differently, but to compare, like I've seen like on like the U of M campus, like in Dinkytown, like those kids don't give a fuck from what I've seen. Like it's wild. Base, have you noticed that at all?
I feel like, see, that's where my theory comes from, because I know it's with like the college kids here in Minnesota. If you're on college campus, no one gives a fuck. But if you leave outside campus and you go anywhere in the public, it's COVID lockdown. You can't do nothing. Now the governor says he's gonna open up things in like a couple of weeks here. We're gonna be back to pretty much normal in a week or two. But I mean, for the past several months, it's been, it's kind of like what Ken said. The universities are pretty much carefree, and outside university walls are lockdown.
I have a lot of different notes written down. I'm very curious. I was thinking, like, preparing for this, like, man, I grew up like in theater and like plays and musicals, but I feel like I know very few dancers, and I have like a lot of like rudimentary dumb questions.
That's totally fine.
So please, like, forgive that, the lack of nuance, I suppose. But I was just curious, like, what it's like being in that like university environment, like studying dance. So I have like a lot of dumb questions written down. Like, for example, like, when you're in this dance program, are a lot of your classes like in a classroom or like in a dance studio? Like, what is that like?
So it's funny because we do have, so when you're a dance major, you have a lot of movement-based classes, right? So a lot of things that are going to require you to be active. And then you have your like dance history classes and your choreography classes and your kinesiology is one, for example, where it's more of a classroom setting. But it's in the classroom setting, we do it in the studio. So like we sit on the floor of the studio and learn the material from there. So classroom setting becomes the studio, like regardless of if it's more of an academic class or if it's movement. It's weird. So we never leave the dance building, basically.
Sure.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. Like, are there exams? Like, I was just like thinking in my head, like, how do you grade a dance? Like, I was just like trying to figure that out. Like, it seems like a tough thing.
It is. So, of course, like, okay, we have two different history classes. We have the kinesiology, of course, which is easier because you have papers and you have actual like written exams that you'll sit down for, which is what everyone knows how to grade. There's a scale, like right and wrong. Then when you get into things like choreography and technique classes, improvisation, most of it is participation. So like most of it is, do you show up to class?
Sure.
In classes that are movement based, where you you need something other than participation, there are milestones that you have to reach, right? So in a technique class, there are certain, what's the word that I'm looking for? Criteria, I guess.
Sure.
Milestones that you're supposed to hit throughout the course of the semester. And then once you hit those milestones, I'm pretty sure I'm using the wrong word, but I'm pretty sure the point is coming across. But once you reach those requirements, like you're basically guaranteed to go either to the next level or you're just getting a good grade, but you're staying in the same level of technique. And in a choreography class where you're creating work, and that's a difficult space to be because what is good and what is entertaining is very subjective. Like what someone might define as good and talented and entertaining might be different than the next person. So it has to be very strategical in the way that our assignments are given. Like, here's this concept, here's what we want you to make a work about or around. And if you hit those marks, then you're still going to get a good grade regardless of if maybe it's not their style and they don't really like it,
Sure.
So it's art majors are a specific type of people. We want to get into all the crevices of life, and we're just talking about it all the time. So
hell yeah, love that.
Right. Now, that's interesting to me because I'm guessing that you would consider dance a sport, right? And I would say so too. An argument that I get from a lot of my friends who say dance isn't a sport is because of the fact that dance is so subjective, right? Like I coach track and field, which is my favorite sport, and it's the most objective sport because it's here's your time, here's the distance, this is where you mark up against everyone else, right? It's could not get more objective, right? Whereas dance, you don't have those concrete like numbers of objectivity. So I'm wondering, like, I don't know, it just seems I see how it's a sport because it requires athletic ability, it requires, you know, all these different things. But what would you say is someone who would say that because it's not as objective as most sports, that it's not a sport? What would you say is someone who would make that argument?
That's a really, really freaking good question. So there are two ways that you can go with this question. I feel like, yes, there are types of dance that are not athletic. They don't require the athleticism that a different type of dance would. My argument would be that the term athleticism should be given to certain techniques and not styles, right? So if you look at ballet, classical modern dance, hip hop, there are elements of those genres of dance that require athleticism. For instance, like heart rate, muscular awareness, just endurance, strength, flexibility. And you can measure certain aspects of technique, like how much external rotation you have, how deep you're going into a plie, which is a bend of the knees. You know, so there are certain measurable aspects of dance, but I would say that it's only in terms of technique. Because choreographically, you can go in so many directions. Like you could make a whole piece about walking, and you're going to tell somebody that that's like a sport? Probably not. Or like a gestural piece, whereas you're using your hands a lot. It's not athletic, but if you look at something that has a technique, that has a structure, I do think that there is athleticism in that. I also would say that in dance, I think that because some people will argue that it's a sport, my argument to that, my counter argument is, are you putting in the work? Like, are you actually training? Are you cross training? Like, we have to do a little bit extra because not only are we doing the physical work, but we have to like kind of make it look good while we're doing it. It's not like you can breathe heavily and that is attractive to people. so yeah.
That is a perfect like segue. So kind of one of my other dumb questions was, how do you study in dance school? And that kind of ties in with like your training. Like, how often do you train? What does that schedule look like for you? Because you're talking a lot about these like different aspects you have to focus on.
Mm-hmm. So for dance majors, because there's a major and a minor, for majors that are looking to get a fine arts degree, it's more performance based. So you have technique classes twice a day, 4 times a week. If you are specifically a ballet-based major, you're probably going to have technique classes 5 days a week. Usually every semester you get a choreography class. You either get some sort of seminar, either improvisation or a dance history class, and then rehearsals. So if you're cast in a piece and you're going to perform on stage or on video now, as it is, you have rehearsals, like whenever the choreographer holds the rehearsals. So in the thick of it, and you have your academic classes, because you also have to do prereqs. So in the thick of it, the schedule day to day is pretty full. Like you have pretty long days. If you're really focused on getting into a company, like if you want to dance professionally, you're training almost every day, and you're doing cross training. So you're going to the gym, you're doing some cardio, you're doing some weight training. A lot of people are into weight training now. So yeah. And how do we study? That's a good question. I think it depends on what class you're in, because
that's fair. I think that definitely applied to me in school too.
Good. It depends, like, because of course in your typical like history class, you're going to study from the book. Like you're going to study the dates and the people and like the chronological order of things. Mm-hmm. In choreography, I think a lot of it has to do with studying your own body, which is why we do improvisation a lot. Like you're figuring out how you move, you know, so how do I move as an individual? How can I make that into cohesive dance work? So the studying happens in so many different places. It's very kinesthetic, I would say.
Just to back up a little bit. So you mentioned earlier that you, at one point you were studying exercise science. Now, being the big exercise science head myself, I'm wondering, why'd you leave us? Why'd you go and pursue dance? I mean, dance is cool, everything, but it's the best major in the world. Why go? I don't know.
No, so I won't lie to you. If I had gone into school for exercise science from the beginning, I probably would have stuck with it. The problem was so I had a really complicated history with college. I went in as a dance major and then I left halfway through, was like, but I still need to go to college. So I jumped in right away into exercise science. Then they told me that it was going to take me 6 years to graduate. And I was like, maybe not.
Yeah.
For me, I like to be like 100% into what I'm doing. So when they told me that, they're like, it's going to take all this extra time and you're going to be spending all this extra money, I just like got wide-eyed and terrified of that. And then my heart was kind of all over the place. As much as I wanted to do it, I was just like, that's not where my passion lies. I might consider going back for another degree at some point in my life. You never know. But yeah, that's basically it. I just didn't want to go into something that I wasn't going to be like all in devoted. And I know that exercise science is like you got to be devoted. You got to put in the work. So
that is the truth. That's 100% the truth.
I have respect for you. Mad respect.
Appreciate that.
So you mentioned, using video to convey like the dance art form that you've been doing. And I was kind of curious. I was thinking about that and thinking about like TikTok and how I feel like I see so many people dancing more than I've ever seen before. Like just the numbers are staggering. And I was thinking about that and I was wondering, like, do you think that, because I know I've seen you post some of your dancing videos like on Instagram, and I was wondering, do you think that the use of video and the use of social media is affecting how dancers approach their art? Like, is it bringing any like evolution to like the art form? Like, are you seeing people like change or like kind of mold to like meet that format?
Yes and no. I think so. I don't have a TikTok. I stay away from it because it's another way to just be like addicted to my phone and looking
for the best. For the best. I have it and I regret that I have
very
it.
addictive. Very, very addictive.
It's just another way. And especially as a young person, we're always looking for validation in some sort of way. And I think social media was the drug that solved that problem for everybody. It's like, how much validation can I get from such and such different sources? And I think that as little of that as I possibly can have in my life, I will keep going in that direction.
Respect.
Fair enough.
But in the dance field, there's been a sharp left turn in the dance world to where commercial dance, which is kind of like jazz, hip hop, contemporary, and a lot of these new like avant-garde styles that have kind of like rose from the ashes, are becoming really popular. And people are basing a lot of their choreography and their work on things that will like get a reaction. Like the people will say like, wow. So I guess in a way people are looking to make like a viral video or like something that's really cool or something that's going to like, I don't know, just get a lot of views, I guess. And I think that it's kind of tainted the dance world in a little bit, because something that I love about dance is that you can create whatever you want. It doesn't mean that it's going to be likable, but you can kind of do whatever you want. And I think a lot of people are kind of going in that direction where they're making things that they think people will like, but it's not necessarily genuine to what they want to do.
Right.
And I don't know if that's 100% true. I'm only speaking from like my perspective, but
talk your shit. Talk your shit.
The people know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't dance commercially well. Like I don't do hip hop like a G. Like I'm not good at it.
Sure.
I have to practice a lot to like look halfway decent. But as someone who loves to recognize beauty, I think we miss the mark sometimes. I think like maybe redefining like what is beautiful it might be the solution. You know, we're getting to be like really fast paced and like we need to create all the time and put work out and like get all the likes and, you know, be entertaining. But at some point you kind of have to like take that step back and say like, what am I doing this for? You know, like what's the reason and what value does it have? Like, am I putting value out into society? Because I think that's important too.
To relate to that, I'm a cook and I'll see so many terrible cooking tutorials, particularly on like TikTok, for example. And the people will be like, wow, you're so amazing. Like, it's like, no, they're not, bro. Like, this is a very rudimentary recipe. And like, fair enough. Like, you know, like maybe you're just like learning, like I certainly am. But it is wild what will get attention.
Yep.
And also there will be things that are clearly gimmicky and those will get attention. And sometimes even more than like the simple, but like well executed dish. And it's like, it's like honestly kind of like gross even to see like, you're actually going to eat that? Like, that's like, you shouldn't do that. So I can relate to that. That can be frustrating to see.
That's so interesting. Sure. So interesting.
In terms of just like people I follow on social media, you're like one of the most consistently creative people I see. And I've just seen you like for like years, just like post, whether it's like stretching routines or like dance videos, or just maybe like you're talking like on your story about like how you're like handling like a situation and like how it might like influence your art. And so I was curious, as like a creative myself, like how do you keep yourself like motivated? Like what do you use to motivate you creatively?
Also a good question. Oh man, it's so beautiful. Like the thing that I do, the fact that like I can go to school for dance is like the most mind-blowing thing to me still. Like I get to get a degree in the thing that I love, you know? But with that comes the struggle of like, it's my job to be creative. So it gets very easy to attach your value to the work that you put out. Like, man, like I'm not inspired and the work that I'm putting out is kind of like crappy and like blah, blah, blah. But I will say that sometimes when I am feeling like uninspired, because sometimes you just have to make work when you're not inspired. I think that's a difficult thing too, like is getting up and being like, shit, like I don't feel like it. And it's not even like and it just sometimes becomes a task that you have to complete. So I would say that the only way to stay motivated is not to be super hard on yourself. I think for me, inspiration doesn't always strike when I want it to, but when it does, I usually get that energy to move. Like for instance, today it happened and I just like wrote a bunch of crap down and I was like, I have all these ideas and like, I know what I want to create, but 80% of the time, like I don't have ideas. I don't know what to do. I'm like, what do these people want to see? Like, I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, it's tough because when your job is to be creative, it's very easy to knock yourself down. And then the motivation just kind of like from there. So.
Right. I feel that. I totally feel that. One thing I've been trying to do the past few months has been just put some habits in my just everyday schedule that are like a little bit of like a creative, like muscle memory type thing, like maybe like playing a little piano or like doing a writing exercise or something like that. Because my thing is like, I'm very much the same way where it's like, oftentimes when I want to have a great idea for like I'm working on music right now. And I'm like, when I'm really trying to have a great idea for a song, it usually doesn't come when I'm trying to have a great idea. So I'm trying to just be ready for when a good idea comes to me and then I can go with it. You know, like that's the worst thing that I would fear. Like I wouldn't be able to convert that thing into like a more tangible, like when it did come by, you know?
That's so true. It's so true. You have to have the little space created to catch it when it falls into the basket.
Yeah. You got to have the net ready. And hopefully the idea swims in and you like pull it up, but you have to, that's true.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh my gosh.
So where do you see yourself going after college? Once you got your degree and once you out in the real world, and I mean, you've had dance experience, you know, for so many years now. So where do you see yourself going after this college journey you're on right now?
So I would say like right after college, I would love to get a full-time teaching gig. I actually was teaching full-time before I came back to school, which I will tell you, even though I did put myself back a few years, getting the real world experience that I did, like teaching in a professional environment and kind of having to scramble and figure it out, as I went, was super helpful. And when I came back to school, I had this like renewed perspective on what it is that I was doing and how I was doing it. So I definitely think like right after college, I'd love to get a full-time teaching gig, specifically at a high school, like an arts high school. And then long-term, I would love to be a professor at a university and do what like my professors are doing now.
Dope.
Yeah. Dope. That would be cool. That's the dream.
That's awesome. I'm curious. I wonder, because Baez has been like coaching for a long time. Like, I wonder if there's any correlations between like coaching in that sense, like weight training or whatever else, and like teaching in dance, what you were doing. What type of dance were you teaching?
So I was teaching classical ballet to high schoolers and middle schoolers, and I was teaching modern contemporary. And then I was also teaching floor bar and like baby ballet and like point work variations. So I was teaching like a pretty good range of dance.
Nice.
Mostly ballet and modern, but
Being a coach for, strength and conditioning, football, track and field, I basically coach every sport under the sun, right? It's really interesting because oftentimes I'll get dancers that are either there for track or for weight room or whatever. And for whatever reason, it just seems like the athletic ability that they gain from dance doesn't always translate to the sport that I'm doing. Like one example is like in dance, you practice plantar flexion, right? All the time. Whereas most of the sports I'm involved in, you want to have dorsiflexion in your feet. So there's a learning curve that has to happen with that. I'm curious, does it happen on the flip side with you? Do you ever get people who are athletes in other sports that come to dance, they have to learn this whole new way of moving their body? Does that happen often, or do you not really see that?
Absolutely. Because so people that are classically trained in dance, and it's evolving the way that we train our dancers now, but you're trained to like keep your weight on the balls of your feet, right? So then when you go into a weight room and somebody tells you like, hey, do a Romanian deadlift, but keep your weight in your heels, that's a foreign concept for dancers. We're like, wait, excuse me, what? Like, no.
Yeah.
But it's that adjustment of like how you carry your weight, where your weight is in your body. That's a big thing, is like weight bearing. Like, where is it in your feet? Where is it in your pelvis? Where is it, up to your shoulder girdle? With athletes, I want to say that it's just like the coordination is different. Like when you use your arms and your legs at the same time, that can be really tricky, and it's not a natural thing necessarily. So it takes a lot of time to adjust to the coordination. I want to say that I've only experienced like one athlete come and take a ballet class, and it was very scary for him. Many, to say the least.
Well, it's a thing now. A lot of college coaches, they'll have their offensive linemen. They'll go and take ballet classes now.
Really?
I think it's a thing. It's a big thing in college football.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Do it at USF. They don't do it at USF. I'm shocked.
Yeah, a lot of D1 schools across, the Midwest and even on the East Coast now, they're doing that. They're sending their linemen to learn ballet techniques so they can balance better in the field.
Heck yeah.
Damn, that's awesome. Yeah, I've always, for years, I've thought, for whatever reason, I felt that like me at my peak performance, like being my best, like I would be taking like a weekly dance class at like the YMCA or something. Like, I don't know why that's in my head, but I see that happening. And I feel like I'm going that direction. It's going to take some time.
It's so true. I always feel like whatever realm of fitness that you're in, like if it's dance, if it's sports, if it's just weight training, if it's swimming, like whatever it is, I think that it's good to be well-rounded in your training, like especially dancers. Like I always used to encourage my students, like do other things. Like don't just dance, or like don't just do the sport that you're in. Like you train your body to be so uncomfortable that you have to figure out how to adapt to that. And I think that that's when
I
you
love
gain
that.
real strength. You know what I mean? Like you
Yes.
have to be adaptable, and like even if you're not adaptable, like figure out how to adjust. And it's going to suck for a little bit, but I think that those are the most well-rounded and the strongest athletes, people in general.
I could not agree more with that. That's awesome. I love that. I also have to say too that I have a big respect for dancers because I know that like most people, dancers or not, or people in the general public, they walk into a weight room and they can learn and they can become pretty good at what we do in the weight room. I can never go to a ballet studio and become an elite dancer. That's just not happening. I can become more flexible, get better, but I'm not gonna get to that level. Whereas someone from your side of the field could probably come in the weight room and over time become pretty good. So I mean, hats off to you dancers. You guys are something special for real.
Oh, I really appreciate that. That's cool. I think, yeah, I don't ever take offense to people who don't understand and like who don't respect the field, because the reality is like if you're not in it, you don't get it. You know, like if you've never done it before, you're not going to understand. It's the same way when you say to someone like that's going through something like, yo, I totally get you, but you've never experienced that.
Right.
And the person's like,
Yeah.
but you get me because like you've never been through it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly.
like that, you know? So
For sure.
Yeah.
So going on this track of like training athletically and also putting in the time for like a creative endeavor, I think like knowing when to recharge and when you need to rest is so huge. How do you like check in with yourself to know like when you need that rest, and how do you recharge?
So I will say that for a good period of time, I want to say this was maybe like a year and a half ago, I went into this mode where I was just doing the most. Like I was training in the weight room, I was taking dance classes, I was teaching, and I was working out on top of the weight. Like I was just doing everything. And my whole entire day of the entire week was just physical activity. And like, don't get me wrong, I was in great shape. But
For
you
sure.
can only sustain like that level of intensity for so long.
Mm.
So it got to a point where like I was doing these like stints on the treadmill to get to 1,000 calories, and I would do that like 4 days a week. And at a certain point, I was just like, I can't,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
can't do it anymore.
Yeah. For real.
So I think it's finding the balance, you know. So I would take it to this extreme where I was like really driven by the numbers, and I would hit the numbers, and I would like be really crazy. But then at a certain point, your body just gives out. So I think the most important thing is like learning how to get in tune with your body, figuring out like what is your limit, and then saying like, okay, but I don't need to go to my limit every single day so that I can sustain this.
Gotcha. Love that. So we're coming close to the end of our Zoom little thing here. I want your advice. So
Okay.
I have a fitness goal that I said, and I mentioned it to Baez. I actually have several this year. One of them is to do the full splits. And yeah, yeah. And like, look, like I'm lanky, but like that's just like that's why I can touch my toes sometimes. Like I'm not flexible. Like yeah, oh yeah. I'm like a marionette. I'm not flexible.
Like a
So,
orangutan.
oh yeah, for sure. So I'm like, I need any help I can get. Do you have any advice on like YouTube channels you might recommend, or like types of stretches, or like when you were training for stretching, like how you like approached it? Because it's gonna be a struggle, I think.
Oh, 100%. Okay, so my practical advice is when you're stretching, any sort of static stretching should always be done after your workout.
Okay.
So after you do like heavy physical activities, when you can like sit in a stretch and be static. Before, it's usually dynamic stretching. So never staying in one place, like you're moving in and out.
Right.
I will say that because, and I don't remember exactly the reason for this, but we have the same joints in our hips as we do in our shoulders, but we have a lot more mobility in our shoulders than we do in our hip sockets.
Okay.
So you have to treat the hip socket 3-dimensionally. And when you do that, you have to stretch both like the inner thighs and the groin, and then the lateral parts of your glutes. So when you're stretching, one of the good ones is the frog.
Okay.
Which
The frog.
Totally look it up. It's like everywhere.
Gotcha.
And I don't know what the name of this stretch is, but it's when you sit with like your heel over top of your knee.
Oh, I've been doing that one. I don't know the name of it either. I have been doing that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a really good one.
Hell yeah.
And the more that you like push your knee down, of course, like you don't actually press on your knee, you press on like the upper part of your thigh.
Sure.
That one's good. And then if you lay on the ground with your back on the floor and you put your feet straight up and you open them and you kind of let gravity do the work, that's another good one.
Jesus. All right.
Yeah, but you have to do it in stages. Like,
okay. Yeah.
Start with bent positions and then you work your way to like your legs being straight. But you just do those every day and you should be good to go.
Damn. All right. Well, I'm inspired. I thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for being on the podcast. We really appreciate talking with you. This was fun.
Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Guys, thank you for listening to the episode with our friend Francesca. We are so glad she came on the podcast today. I thought it was a really fun conversation. We learned a lot about dance. Definitely opened my eyes up to a couple of new things in the dance world I never thought about before.
Hell yeah. Creative process and like, yeah. And just like the training that goes into it as well. So yeah, I loved it. Yeah. It was a great conversation. You guys can follow Francesca. She's on Instagram at Fran_Bun. So at FRAN_BUN. So you can follow her there, support her dance. Yeah, check it out.
Guys, at Cook and Coach Pod on Instagram, Cook and Coach on TikTok, the Cook and the Coach on YouTube. Go follow us, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your stranger. Who knows? Just tell everybody, all right?
Everybody.
My social media, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, at Baeza, BAEZA, TENSAIE. Ken, you got Haymarket Catering, you got Haymarket Pantry, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I have a couple pages. I have a food page on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. It's called Haymarket Pantry. So like at Haymarket Pantry. And I also have a music page at Kenny Martin Music, also Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. So check those out. I have some fun stuff I'm working on for both of those. And yeah, thanks again for listening, y'all. Appreciate it.
Guys, that is the episode. We will see you next time.
Peace.